Down to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the #1 liquid-fueled, liquid lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast. Oh my gosh. My intro is set to a specific time and I have it automatically flip. Well, apparently I have a hotkey somewhere that I apparently have a hotkey somewhere in the in my programming that I accidentally hit, which of course threw all of the timing and everything off. So I had to manually get the thing started. Oh my gosh. Okay. Wonderful things. All right. So tonight I have a bit of conversation about Biden and his, he seems to have actually started to realize that he is in trouble. There are a couple of articles that came out, here recently, especially that we were talking about, that just had a, he's finally starting to understand that maybe he's got a problem, internally to his own White House as well as, elsewhere. So, but before I get into that, I've got a couple of things. First of all, I want to point out the new background. I mentioned it last weekend or on Saturday. I mentioned it that I would be rotating some backgrounds in because thankful to the man, the myth, the legend, Buddy Weiser, sending me a bunch of possible backgrounds. I'm going to go ahead and rotate through the ones that I can use. For those of you that might want to send me something, if you're planning on sending me a image that is for a background, it's best if you have it at 1920 by 1080, which is the size of the layout that I actually have. So I can use other photos, but I have to like modify them a little bit, and sometimes they don't stretch right and that kind of stuff. So if you're planning on sending me a background or something like that you want me to use in the show, the best way to do it is to send me 1920 by 1080. And of course you can do that at fans@whiskeymusings.online. Fans, F-A-N-S, at whiskeymusings.online. Link is in the description below on the video. All right. So tonight I want to talk a little bit about the Institute on the Constitution, of course, for the next step. And we are talking about the Institute on the Constitution being established in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit with one singular mission: to restore the constitutional republic through grassroots education. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government as defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following three key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. And 3, the purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States. They also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Now, I am going to start. I've had 3 people who have expressed interest in this. I am starting a Constitution class through the Institute on the Constitution, and it will be kicking off after Independence Day. This is the actual student manual that we will be working through. So you can get this student manual. If you are interested in the class, do 2 things. 1, drop me a line at fans@whiskeymusings.online so that I can get your feedback on when to do it. Right now, we're kind of looking at a few days during the week. Obviously, I got to fit it in my schedule as well as everybody else's schedule. But also, you're going to need that course manual. And the course manual actually comes in two different formats. It comes in a digital format for about $20, or I'm sorry, about $10. And then it comes in the paper format that I just showed you for about $38, I believe. You can find both of them if you go to the link IOTC, that's India Oscar Tango Charlie .whiskeymusings.online, and that will actually take you to the front page, and you can go to shop, and once you get there, go to all course material, and you'll be able to find the U.S. Constitution course student kit. Now, the kit comes with the book. It comes with a couple of DVDs with some videos on it that we'll be reviewing in class. It comes with the Constitution in the leather, the Saddleback leather. All of this stuff comes, and of course, that's if you want to buy the kit. The kit's like $120. You don't need the kit. In fact, I encourage you to just get the manual alone. There will be a drop down where you can drop down and just buy either the digital manual if you prefer digital format, or the actual physical manual you can go with as well. I would just say if you're going to attend the class, just get the physical manual or the digital manual. And yes, as Daybreak has put in the chat over here on Rumble, I will get a bit of the proceeds. I do get a commission on the sale of those products. Got to put that out up front because I am an affiliate. So if you use my link, iotc.whiskeymusings.online, if you use that link, I will gain the credit for the sale. And here you go, buddy. Buddy asked for holding up the manual again. It is for the U.S. Constitution course. It is the student manual, as you can see right down here. And that is, it's a pretty thick book. I mean, the class is 12 weeks. There's 12 lectures for it. So the class is going to be a 12-week thing. We're planning on meeting once a week to go over things, and you'll have some homework and stuff like that to learn about our wonderful founding document, the U.S. Constitution. And hey, if you're not interested in the class or whatever, go ahead and, if you're just interested in the Constitution, go ahead and take a look at this. This is a Saddleback leather Constitution. You can find this particular item, the specific item to support the show, at constitution.whiskeymusings.online. That's constitution, all lowercase, .whiskeymusings, all lowercase, all one word, .online. And you can do that. And you can just pick up this wonderful thing. And this is it's got a 100-year guarantee on it by the manufacturer from material defects. It's got great pages in here. It's got stitching to hold it and bind it together. It's kind of a keepsake heirloom. And I will get this as well. And yes, Daybreak, I did get it. Everything's gotten all figured out. I had we had an issue where somebody had used the link. I knew about it, but it didn't show up in my account. I've gotten all of that fixed, just so you know. All right. So, okay. So we're moving on. So instead of doing the poem tonight, and instead of doing the reading from the Patriots Almanac tonight, I'm going to quote a couple of people, a couple of great Americans. One of them, of course, being the great Thomas Sowell. And his quote here is, "Have we reached the ultimate stage of absurdity, where some people are held responsible for things that happened before they were born, while other people are not held responsible for what they themselves are doing today?" And that is from, again, the great Thomas Sowell, who was an economist and great American. He actually used to be a Marxist at one point, and then learned about our system and everything, and actually changed his mind in terms of that. So Thomas Sowell. Also tonight, I had a couple of texts that I just wanted to check real quick. So also tonight, I have a partial quote from the great Ronald Reagan, which basically states that it's not that our liberal friends don't know anything. It's that they know so much that isn't so. And that came from one of his speeches that he gave as a part of the Barry Goldwater campaign. I believe it was in 1964. It's an awesome speech. I have the video. I listened to it. It is, it's a great speech. If you get a chance, you can look it up on YouTube. I don't have the link in the description, but if you want it, you can just email me and I'll send it to you. But it's an absolutely awesome speech. Again, the great communicator, Ronald Reagan, wonderful guy. And probably I would say the last great presidents. And again, not to tear down anything about Donald Trump necessarily, but I honestly, I don't think he ranks quite in the category of the great Ronald Reagan. Now tonight, I missed this on Saturday. I did not actually specify what I did not specify what I was drinking. So tonight, I'm actually not drinking whiskey. My wife, who is Italian, she, for some reason or another, decided that she was going to go with mimosas. And so that's what we're drinking tonight, is I'm having a wonderful mimosa. Nice and cool here in the studio. It's a 50-50 mix of champagne and orange juice. So wonderful, wonderful drink. All right. So I don't know if anybody's caught. We've had a lot of, and actually, let me just do this so I can get my social stuff going. All right. So we've had a lot of news that has come out, and in particular, we've had a lot of news stories about Joe Biden and how he's not exactly happy with his White House staff, and he's certainly not happy with his numbers. I mean, just reports are that there was a new poll that came out that he actually slipped from 38% approval down to 34% approval. I don't know for sure where that is. I didn't really look for it, but the fact is he is really, really, really in the toilet, and and he's getting frustrated, to be honest, because he believes that he's doing great for the country. And honestly, that's part of his downfall, is that he actually believes that he's doing wonderful things for the country. But this is what's really interesting about some of these articles that I'm about ready to show you have to deal with the fact that they are coming from left-leaning outlets, news outlets. And so this first one here that I want to show you, this one is coming from NBC News. And the title here, you can see it. It says, inside a Biden White House adrift. And the thing about it is that he's sitting here and he's looking at his presidency so far. And of course, we're coming up to midterms. So this is a really big time for him because, of course, I mean, let's admit it. The midterms are likely going to be a complete slaughter. There's already been indications of it. There's a lot of things that are going on in the back end, and realistically, the Democrats their messaging is horrible. They've kind of made a bunch of missteps along the way. Not saying that they're smart enough to really understand that they've made missteps, but they've made a lot of missteps along the way, and they are really playing out of favor with the American public, because the American public is, by all polling data, is looking at things like the economy as a huge, huge thing. I mean, when you start impacting people in their wallets and what Nancy Pelosi terms as kitchen table issues, these are the things that are on people's minds that are the few things that impact pretty much everybody has to deal with paying more for the cost of food, more for the cost of your gas to get you around, all kinds of stuff. And so, he's really failed on all of these points. Now, the funny thing about it is that regardless of what he is doing here, he still believes that he's done a wonderful thing for the country. And I'll admit there have been a couple of numbers like the unemployment rate that has dropped down. And it's gotten to pretty close to pre-pandemic levels, I'm going to say. But the thing about it is that even though he has done that, that's only one singular metric. And we're not even 100% sure as to why, because the other factors that are involved in a lot of this has to deal with and surrounds this thing called inflation. And if you listen to people in the news, they're saying, oh, inflation's not that impactful. But what I say, and what a lot of other people on the right who actually understand what's going on say, is that inflation by itself may not be impacting, but when it starts to impact the day-to-day sales of things, that's where we're going to get into trouble. And for anyone who is old enough who can remember in the Carter era, this whole situation that Biden's got going on is very reminiscent of the Carter era, which of course set up to have the great and absolutely wonderful Ronald Reagan to come into play. Now, the Ronald Reagan years, as far as finances are concerned, they weren't exactly the greatest. They had, there was high interest rates because he was trying to combat inflation. He did lower taxes, which stimulated the economy. And by all intents and purposes, looking back on it, his procedures for the most part were correct, were the correct way to do things. Lower taxes, raise interest rates, and remove government regulations on a lot of things in order to stimulate the economy and get us moving again. Now, what didn't really start kicking off until his second term, as far as getting all of these things in place. So honestly, if we end up with another couple of years of Biden and then hopefully in 2024, get a Republican president who will do and take the Reagan pattern and Reagan playbook and actually apply it to this situation, I think we may be looking at probably at least, 6 years before we really see anything maybe on the inside if we're really, really lucky. But one of the things that the Democrats seem to fail to understand is that inflation is driven specifically by how much money is being printed. And so all of this money that we're sending off to Ukraine, all of this money that we've used in the stimulus checks, all of this money that we've been the infrastructure boondoggle, and then of course the attempt at Build Back Better, all of these things are playing into the whole inflationary cycle. Because as far as inflation is concerned, it's essentially what the value of a particular, in this case, the US dollar, actually is. So the value of the dollar is going to go down the more dollars that you have available. And also, especially when you're in a situation where you have a supply and demand problem, where you have more dollars chasing after specific goods and services. And all of this, I mean, I'm not an economic expert by any means, but all of this sets up the whole inflationary cycle. And so this is honestly, especially recently, has been Joe Biden's biggest problem, is that he keeps saying that he's going to address it. but he never actually does. And he continually talks about raising taxes, raising spending, because in his mindset, he believes that by doing those things, he's actually going to fix the money problem. And he's realistically, what he's ending up doing is he's making it worse. So that is part of the issue. And in this particular article, he kind of talks a little bit about that. But the other thing that's really getting his goat also is the fact that he's going on, in public, and he's standing up at the podium and he's saying things and just like seemingly pulling it out of the air, saying stuff. And when he says something, his White House staff immediately goes back and tries to backtrack it. And I've got a couple articles to illustrate that. But he seems to be doing this quite often. And the thing about it is it's not so much the fact that Biden just grabs stuff right out of the air. I mean, he spent, 40, 50 years in politics, and he has a habit of pulling stuff just out of the air. I mean, case in point, where he was talking about how, he, I think it was, I'm trying to think of who he met, but I think it was Nelson Mandela. He's talked about, being appointed to Annapolis, how he used to ride the Amtrak train all the time. He used to be a trucker, all of these things that he's making up, with what's going on. And he's just making these things up out of the air as he speaks. And so this is something that anyone who actually took a look at his 40 years ahead of time and before he became president and realized his 40 plus years and realized that he, he just makes this stuff up, and he plagiarizes too. And the funny thing about this is that when he made his other two presidential runs prior to this one, the news media actually called him out on it. I mean, we definitely have video about that. But he flat out lies. I'm sorry. He flat out lies about just whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And he just pops it open and just starts talking. And that's a bit of a problem. And unfortunately, he's looking at this and he's saying, okay, I'm looking at this and I think that when I make a statement, that's the law and that's the way things should be. And he's getting really frustrated over his White House staff backing things off whenever he makes a statement. And he's saying, rightfully so, that this is playing into the narrative that he is not in control of the White House. You know what? I don't know of anyone with any semblance of a brain can actually say that this guy is 100% in control of the White House, let alone in control of his faculties. Okay. So he's in a lot of trouble. He's in a lot of trouble here, and he's getting frustrated with it, and rightfully so. I mean, most of the messes that he's created are of his own doing. I mean, honestly, as Ben Shapiro pointed out, he's like, the people who voted for him, all they wanted him to do was be basically in the basement, don't do anything, just, be moderate old Grandpa Joe and not do anything to affect what eventually would have happened had he left crap alone to come out of the pandemic, which would have been just a booming economy and so on and so forth. But he didn't do that. He came out and he decided to take a really hard left turn and follow more of the Bernie Sanders crowd, because he thought that Bernie Sanders was his way forward. And he's failing miserably. And to be honest, I don't even know if there's a way for him to come back from that. But it's not just him and and the White House staffers who are trying to cover for him. He also talks about how the news media themselves are not covering for him as much anymore. And realistically, I mean, take a look at the, NBC News. I mean, they should be covering for him, but they're actually calling him out on the fact that he's such a bad leader. He's such a bad leader. And now, let me show you this. So this comes from the Politico, which is a absolutely left-wing rag. I mean, if you listen to Dan Bongino at all, the Politico puts out the Political Playbook every day, and that playbook is basically a good place to go to get a reference as to what the left is actually thinking and what they're concerned about. Well, in this particular case, Politico put a piece out where it's talking about Biden seeing an exodus of black staffers and some frustration among those who remain. Now, to be fair, if you read through the article and you get down into it, you'll find that, just from the headline, you would think, oh, well, Biden staffers are leaving. They're leaving on bad terms. They're saying, to hell with this, and they're taking off or whatever. But that's actually not the case. However, they are leaving. And the reason I think that Politico put it this way is because of the fact that Joe Biden has stood himself up as being a champion for people of color and those who are considered marginalized within our society. And so this is, this just to have Politico even bring this up is really an interesting angle to look at. And they're calling it out because, of course, anybody on the left, diversity is number one. Forget about the fact of whether or not you're actually qualified to do the job, but diversity is number one. And, they go and they call this out, and they're talking in particular about the black staffers, the African-American staffers, and the frustrations of those who are still there. It's an interesting article to take a look at. And I wouldn't put a lot of stock into it because, again, this is the Politico. But, keep in mind that the staffers are actually leaving. And that other NBC article, they were talking about the possibility that after the midterms, Ronald Klain, who is the White House chief of staff, has sort of been hinting that he wants to leave. And there's other staffers who have hinted that, hey, you know what? We're getting tired. We've been here for 3 years. This has been, between the campaign and now in the White House, this is getting, too frustrating. We've had Peppermint Patty just left, and you've got now, Karine Jean-Pierre now, who is the White House press secretary. So, stuff like this, though, if you recall going back into the Trump era, stuff like this doesn't really surprise anybody. I mean, throughout the course of a president's 4 years, several staff are going to turn over. So I wouldn't put too much stock in this, other than the fact that it is an indication that there could be a serious crack in the foundation of the Biden White House. And, outside of that, I think, I think we've got some serious issues that are starting to show up. And what's even better in terms of it is it's not just the right wing that's seeing it. It's actually the left-leaning organizations that are supposed to be covering Biden's butt crack. Okay, that was bad. Anyway, all right. So before I move on to my next series of articles, I do want to bring up that I am considering, and you guys tell me, but I am considering doing something like the Patriotic Pet of the Week. This is, I love animals. I have animals, and I think it would be awesome to see patriotic pets. And maybe it might not be just of the week. It could be of the month. But, you tell me if you're interested in sending in a photo of your pet like this one. This one here, he's actually wearing the hat, albeit a bit modified, but he's actually wearing a hat very similar to the other one that I wear. Not this one here, but the other one that I wear. And this is a bulldog, of course, sent in by Buddy. It's fantastic. You know, you've got patriotism, you've got the pet in there. It's cool glasses. I love the blades. I love the bladed shades. Okay. That's just absolutely awesome. What I really want to know though, is how did you get this wonderful animal to sit still long enough to take a photo? Because my dog will actually duck his head and turn away and so on and so forth. Anyway, so that's Bubba. Okay. So that's Bubba. That is awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that, Buddy. That is a wonderful thing. So if you want to send your photos in, I'm more than happy to throw them up here and put them up. Patriotic pets is what we're going to be talking about for that. But I thought that would be a nice break between topics. Now, we all know that we've been talking or you know, the news media has seriously been talking a lot about the Uvalde shooting. And apparently I'm hearing through the chat that there might even be another shooting that's going on somewhere right this very second. Very, very sad, very horrible. You know, the answer to how we're going to clean them up is not going to be easy. You know, I've been putting out on social media, and I think it's rightfully so, that one of the biggest times, or one of the biggest factors, I should say, in these situations has to deal with the rot that we have going on in our culture, the removal of morals and standards. And whether you think that they're part of, you know, that's part of a religious type of setup, or whether it's just, you know, I mean, simple respect for your fellow human beings is enough. And we're seeing a lot of hate and divisiveness, and this, I feel, is fueling this. And there's a lot of factors that can go in here. I mean, we could talk about social media, we could talk about, you know, video games, we could talk about drugs, we could talk about any number of individual items. But one of the things that I think should happen is we definitely, and this will have literally an immediate impact on the feasibility of attacking these particular targets. And these are drastic measures. As a meme that was put out, you know, when the 9/11 events happened, we didn't ban planes. What we did was we hardened the cockpit. We changed our methodology. We changed the way that we screen people getting on the planes. We changed the planes themselves. We took a multi-tiered approach towards securing the particular weapon. In choice for this, it was, you know, a plane with hundreds of people on it. And we did all of these things, whether or not they're effective or not, you know, that's entirely, it's a totally other debate. But the fact of the matter is that we added things like, you know, scanning people at the airports. You know, we also started with doing things like creating situations where you could apply for special privileges, like the TSA, oh, I can't even think of the name of it, but like Global Pass or whatever it was, where you could go and apply, do a background check, get fingerprinted, and you would be allowed to, you know, keep your shoes on, or keep your backpack on, or keep your phone in your backpack, your laptop in your backpack. Some measure of the next step up in terms of security. This next article that I'm going to show you is demonstrating that Biden once again has no clue of what he is doing. So this came from the Daily Wire. Biden does not support hardening of schools to protect children from mass shooters. Now, this is an interesting take, and honestly, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about the Uvalde shooting, and where the gentleman who performed that heinous act, how he got into the school. And there's been some speculation that a back door was left open. I read an article here recently where the teacher who supposedly propped that door open claims that she didn't prop it open. But the fact of the matter is that our schools, by being, quote, gun-free zones, create soft targets. And this is honestly the same as the theater shooting that happened in Miami, and any of the number of the school shootings, even the mall shooting, because I've seen businesses who have put up signs stating that they don't allow weapons in. And I want you to think about this. If you are a burglar or a criminal, and you know for a fact that if you go and burglarize a certain house, that you're going to have an alarm that you're going to have to contend with. I mean, that's what those ADT signs state on the front of the house. So having an ADT sign creates a question in that burglar's mind as to whether or not it's actually going to be worth it to go and attack that house. Same thing goes if you go to a house and that house is just an absolute, pigsty, dump, things are not cared for, the yard's not cared for. You might think nobody lives there. And if you're a burglar who's looking to go and steal things in order to sell for whatever reason, you're looking to make a profit off of this. So you're probably not going to pick targets that are difficult to deal with, whether it's dealing with a place that has an alarm system, whether it's a place that has a dog, whether it's a place that doesn't even look like it has anything valuable. All of these things combine to make the target less appealing. And one of the challenges that we do have with our schools is the fact that, first of all, these totally deranged lunatics, they have no sense of right and wrong. I mean, it's obvious because they are looking to kill people. And ultimately, many, as I explained in the last episode a little while ago, many of them are on a means to an end mission, meaning that they want to end their own lives for whatever reason. It's not like they go into these schools thinking, yeah, I'm going to get into a hostage situation. I'll be able to claim, look for $5 million or something, and then I'm going to get off scot-free. That doesn't happen. These people are already deranged. They're not thinking very clearly. And so most of these situations they're planned, yes, but they're planned with the idea that we're going out and we're not coming back. So one thing that could affect those targets very, very quickly is if we start hardening our schools. And by hardening, I'm talking about making sure all the doors are locked in the perimeter, with the exception of the front door. Having I can't remember what Dan Bongino called it, but having a setup where the outdoor is open, but the inner door and the entryway itself becomes a box to where it's protected, because the inner door is the one that's actually locked. So somebody coming in could come in through the outer door, but then they have to get buzzed in order to come into the inner door. Maybe make it to where we put in security mechanisms, like you have to have a key card or something like that. We do this at airports all the time. You can't go onto the airport tarmac without somebody going and scanning their key card and typing in their some 4 or 5 digit code in order to get the door open so that they can go onto the tarmac. It's things like this that wouldn't take much, realistically. The other thing too is to have maybe a panic button, as Dan Bongino pointed out in one of the Secret Service's report, to have fire doors or some type of metal doors or chain link fence or something like that, that makes it to where you can segment the school out and resist the ability of that person to be able to move throughout the schools. And so it's all of these things that would be combined, and they could easily be put into place because a lot of these places, a lot of these schools have like heavy metal doors. So you could install electronic magnet locks that only open on keypad. I've seen those and have been a part of those in hospitals, like surrounding the newborn unit. They have things like that. They have doors that you literally cannot open unless you have a key card or the fire alarm is going off and you push the bar on the door. And even then, if you open up the door, like I go up with my key card and I open up the door, it's only allowed to be open for 15 seconds before an alarm goes off and somebody has to come and check the door and make sure it's not blocked open. It's all of these things that are technology that we could easily get in place for when school is in session. And once all of the kids have shown up, and there's ways to go around all of this, but I'm kind of surprised that he doesn't support this. I mean, even if we like keep them a gun-free zone, we can still put in some measures of security with these places and not make them so soft in terms of targets. Now, another thing that Biden did that actually shows his, shall we say, it actually shows his lack of knowledge, understanding. He was standing by a helicopter, getting ready to fly out on Marine One, and he came up with this out of the blue thing. They were talking about rifles and that kind of stuff, and he came up with this out of the blue thing with regards to 9mm. So this is an article talking from Fox News, and he's talking about. He calls 9mm high caliber weapons and suggests banning them. Well, as a part of that conversation, he does talk about how he was talking to somebody, I'm guessing a doctor, where the doctor was saying that a .22 could lodge in the lung and they would be able to pull it out and it may not do anything, whereas a 9mm would actually blast the lung completely out of the body. I'm not going to really break that down. I think a lot of people who are a lot more knowledgeable than I am in terms of the caliber or high caliber weapons and what they do to the human body are much more appropriate and knowledgeable to be able to say this. But I will tell you this: the .22 round is actually the one of the highest penetrating rounds there is available. Even though it is a small caliber, it tends to penetrate objects a lot better than some of these other higher calibers, even as much as like a 45, a 9mm, those kinds of things. The .22 can actually penetrate better than those higher caliber weapons. The .22 also generally does not come in a format of like a full metal jacket. And so when it hits bone on the inside, it tends to fragment, which causes even more damage than just a single bullet that might be staying together would, which is part of the reason why self-defense rounds are what they call like hydroshock, expanding bullets. God, the name is escaping me, but the point is that the idea is that the round, once it penetrates the first, into the first part of the body, it flattens out to ultimately cause more damage and be less likely to go all the way through the subject. This being said, what he also doesn't understand is that the 9mm is actually the most popular round in America, because of the fact that 9mm is the lowest caliber of weapon that police are allowed to carry. It is also a caliber that a lot of women are able to carry because of the fact that there is less of a recoil effect when you're dealing with pistols that don't have any kind of brace to them. And so it's a lot easier to fire a 9mm than it is, say, a 40 or a 45. Okay. And thank you, buddy. Hollow Point. Thank you. I don't know why that freaking just passed me on, but most of the police officers that are out there have 9mm, or at least they haven't changed over. I know some police stations have changed over to like a 40 caliber or something along those lines. But still a lot of stations, a lot of police stations and police will carry 9mm. So, to sit here and to say that 9mm is a problem, I mean, he's pretty much calling out the 9mm. And the other thing that Biden probably does not know is that the 9mm is not typically a rifle round. Now, that being said, you can get a rifle chambered in 9mm if you really want to, but the 9mm is really not designed to be a hunting round. It is not designed to be a high velocity, long range round. And so therefore you end up with the 9mm being directly related to handguns. Okay. So the 9mm caliber is focused on the handgun. Now he calls these, high caliber weapons, and that's true. But he also talks about banning them. So if he's suggesting banning them, and we go back to that conversation where he's getting mad at the White House staffers for backing stuff up, check out this article. And this is also from Fox News. Biden doesn't support a ban on handgun sales. Now think about this. I've already outlined what the 9mm is and what it does. But now the White House press secretary is saying, no. Biden doesn't support a ban on all handgun sales. Well, the fact is, yes, he does. Okay. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't even know why I'm apologizing. He does. His intent, and the Democrats in particular, their full intent is to take away your right to a firearm. They want to get rid of the Second Amendment, period. And the reason being is because of the fact that without an armed society, they can implement whatever draconian, authoritarian rule that they want. They can start to implement things like election irregularities out in the complete open without anyone resisting them, because they will be the only ones who have the weapons. All right. Now, he also has made comments that's like, hey, you know what? I say stuff and the White House backs it off. It makes me look bad because it makes me look like I'm not in charge, which he thinks is a Republican talking point. I can tell you, yeah, it is, but it's also very true. We don't think you're in charge. Now, speaking about voting, don't know if you caught this article. This was put out today by the AP, the Associated Press. Now, funny, I seem to recall not too long ago, a lot of people who were questioning the voting software. And in fact, I still think that there's a case going on. And let me see, it has to deal with what that guy, Rudy Giuliani and, what's her name? Sidney Powell. And then also, don't forget Mike Lindell. All right. So now they're actually stating that there's another cyber agency that's out there that is now saying that voting software is vulnerable in some states. And in this particular article, I believe they are talking specifically about Georgia. Or actually they call it out. Just come to think about it, they're saying it right here. They're saying electronic voting machines from a leading vendor used in at least 16 states have software vulnerabilities that leave them susceptible to hacking if unaddressed. the nation's leading cybersecurity agency says in an advisory sent to state elections officials. So this is actually the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, or CISA, that now they're claiming that there's no evidence that the flaws have been exploited to alter election results. However, I seem to recall several of these locations not turning over the voting machines or having wiped them before handing them over. So yeah, there's no like path toward it. However, but the advisory that they put out is based off of testing by a prominent computer scientist and expert witness in a long-running lawsuit that is unrelated to the false allegations of a stolen election. But he's basically saying that this person is basically saying that there is potential security flaws within the software. Now, I seem to recall, let's see, Wisconsin, Arizona, Michigan, they had, and especially Wisconsin, there was a report that came out, and the report basically said that there is a possibility of irregularities and that some of the machines were actually connected to the internet, and that some of the machines, and this might be, I might be slipping, it might be part of Arizona's lawsuit as well, was that some of the machines were connected to the internet when they shouldn't be, and that some of the machines were also accessed by an IP address that happens to be in a range that belongs to China. Now, I don't know about you, but I know when I sit here and I start sniffing around a news story or a story of any kind, that when I'm told something that doesn't quite seem quite right, where there's smoke, there's usually some kind of fire. And so stuff like this, if you're really looking to, and in this particular case, this is the AP. So the AP is also a left-leaning news organization. Let's be honest, most of them do. But they are already setting up for arguments, I'm betting, for the 2022 midterms, because they know they're going to get slaughtered. So they're throwing these things out here. They're doing the little drip, drip, drip technique that Dan Bongino talks about. And to be honest with you, looking at this, it's like, why would you not at least investigate all of this rather than claiming that this was the most secure, free, and fair election ever? Investigate this stuff. That's just like that, the 2K equine movie that came out. It's not that they're claiming that anything that happened here could possibly have affected the election, but let's take a look. At a minimum, just to clear our minds, allow us the opportunity to investigate fully, and if there are deficiencies found, whether or not they affected the 2020 election or not, doesn't make a difference. But at least take a look, at least dig into it and try to fix these things. And especially stuff like this, where we're leaning on voting machines, this is something that we should be looking at. We should definitely be paying attention to. Now, ironically, with this, we have another potential bombshell that dropped out of Arizona. And this one comes from the Epoch Times. Here, there is a report, and the report is by Verity Voting, Verity Voting, that claims that up to 19,000 were late ballots. And that according to Arizona election law, because they were received in the mail past 7 p.m., that they should never have been counted. Now, I'm just going to throw this out there and just say, how many votes were possible for, that were the difference between Biden and Donald Trump winning the state? Oh, wait, they call that out. The final tally of Joe Biden winning the state with 10,457 more votes than Donald Trump. Now, the interesting thing about the article is the article doesn't know anything about which way the 19,000 votes or whatever they were going back and forth. Okay. They didn't say anything because there's no records. There's none of that stuff. However, again, a mere appearance of impropriety warrants a minimum of an investigation into what's going on. Now, a lot of people have claimed, rightfully so, that mail-in ballots are relatively insecure because you go and you drop them into the mail goes and, how do you know how many times it's been handled? You have no idea whether or not somebody could have opened the envelope. There are some security measures, at least I know here in Washington, where we do mail-in balloting across the board. There are some security measures in place. However, I can guarantee you this. I've been living in this state for over 20 years. I signed up 20 plus years ago with my signature. I haven't changed that signature card, realistically. I mean, I've lived in the same house for 20 years. My signature has changed in that 20 years. I guarantee it. And that's assuming, of course, that I actually haven't fraudulently voted for whatever reason in other locations, because I have lived in other places within this state. And I know that even assigning a change of address, that there is a possibility that those votes that we did have a vote or a ballot go to an older address, because I've lived in like 2 or 3 different places throughout the state. All of these things are very, very suspect. And again, I'm not advocating that the 2020 election had all of these things happen and everything went to Donald Trump. Is it possible? Sure. Is it probable? Don't know until we look into it. So stuff like this is what's causing a lot of the thought process as to where things are insecure. So in terms of this, we need to make sure that our elections are secure. If we, being the beacon of freedom in this country, cannot show that our elections are fair and secure, how can we expect other countries to be able to secure theirs? And that's the main point in all of this. Look, if it happened to be stolen, if you guys coordinated and you got and all of this stuff is done, fine, if that's what proves it out. But the point is, though, that even though it may not have been fully coordinated, I have my suspicions, but if it may not have been fully coordinated, fine. Let's just fix everything that's going on here. I mean, Pennsylvania changed their voting laws right before the election, which is essentially illegal in that state, and the state Supreme Court wouldn't even hear the case. So there's a lot of questions, and I think everybody has a right to it, and I think we should be calling out these people to get this secured and fixed. And mail-in voting, honestly, I think should be regulated and left to just individuals who physically are unable to get to the ballot box, and that you should have an ID and a verified reason as to why you need that absentee ballot. And when you go to your precinct location to vote, you need to have a government issued photo ID. That's going to be the way that we do it. And then, of course, making sure that the ballots do not leave that facility until they are locked up in a bag or a box, like you would, say, ticket receipts from a large sporting venue or a bank or jewelry transfer. They go into armored vehicles, and those vehicles take them to where they need to go. There's plenty of armored vehicles available that we could possibly make this work. to where, I mean, it doesn't have to be like an armored truck, but it could be a hardened vehicle like a van that has, hardened stuff in it. But still, even if we go so far as to just use regular panel vans, you can do things like locking up the bags at the voting facility and then opening them at the counting facility if they're in separate places. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we can do this. And technology wise, we don't necessarily need the voting machines, but I think there should be rules and laws as to when they can get updated. If you're going to update their software, you can't do it within, say, 90 days of the election. And it can only be done via a USB thumb drive that is, again, secured and carried by a secured person from point to point to point. I mean, we track evidence in trials all day long, and we expect chain of custody there. Why can we not do this on a regular basis with our elections? Okay. All right. So the last thing that I want to bring up, just from this week, has to deal with the acquittal. I've talked about the Durham trial. I've talked about Michael Sussman, and realistically, as I stated in my program, I wasn't that enthusiastic about a positive result. But here's the key that a lot of people are possibly missing. I mean, yes, the left is celebrating the fact that, Michael Sussman was acquitted. Okay, you can talk about the jury, you can talk about the venue, you can talk about the DC judge. There's a lot of suspect things going on there. In fact, the foreman of the jury, she has come out and basically said that she thought that this shouldn't even be tried in the first place. So basically you could potentially claim a bias there. We pretty much knew that. There were some relationships that were not disclosed immediately. There's some question on those. I mean, again, there's a whole bunch of questions about the jury and the trial and the judge. We all know that was going to happen. This is, DC. I mean, seriously, it's there. But the key that I think a lot of people are missing is the fact that, and I honestly, if Durham is a smart person, and I'm kind of hoping that he is, but if he's a smart person, he would have known that he wasn't going to get Sussman on lying. He would have gone in with the idea that, hey, I'm going to use this as a stepping stone to discover other things that I normally would not be able to get a warrant for, but that will come out in the trial. And if you're a chess player, you understand that sometimes you have to go and you have to lose a piece in order to gain position. In this particular case, I think that there's a possibility, and again, I'm not entirely sure of Durham, but and this is going to be, vetted out down the road as he continues his investigation, or he doesn't, whichever way it goes. But I think that if he is really trying to go after the person who we all know now is responsible, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, if he's really going to go after those people, he would have used Sussman as a pawn and realized that the loss of the pawn is not going to mean the end of the game. All it means is that he's gained position out of losing that pawn by maybe moving another piece out of the way. And this is how chess works. It's a strategy. It's a long-term strategy. So while I think we're not necessarily going to see anything out of this, I'm hoping and praying that we actually will. And Sussman, I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock in this. I mean, when they go after, RICO cases for like the mob and stuff, they start with the lower underlings and they use the information that they pull from the lower underlings to go after the higher ups. And this is the pattern. This is the way that they get to the top level people. And so that's pretty much why. So I'm going to keep an eye on this. I mean, Technofog has been doing a great job with it and watching it. If you have, you can sign up for his Substack called The Reactionary. But this is going to be taking a while. I mean, this is going to go on for a little while. But I think Sussman, the trial has unearthed some more information that maybe Durham would not have been able to get without going into a trial. So we're going to keep an eye on stuff like that. And that's my final Whiskey Musings thought of the evening. Thank you very much for coming and joining. Please do me a favor. If this is the first time to the program and you like what you see, hit subscribe. If you haven't yet, go over to Rumble and subscribe over there, because that's where the chat is at. I'm telling you. Got a lot of people over there. The chat is active tonight. I thank all of my subscribers and my chatters. This is great. And again, if you feel like you want to send me an email, you want to send me a picture or photo, maybe for the background, or possibly even submit your pet for the Patriotic Pets, that's cool too. It's fans, FANS, at whiskeymusings, all one word, .online. Fans at whiskeymusings, all one word, .online. And we'll see you Saturday. We'll see you next time on the Whiskey Musings broadcast. Good night, everybody.